We're here to chat about port wine, and
Absolutely.
it was so funny. I was telling one of my friends, I was like, the only folks who are willing to talk to me are either in Asia or Europe, like no one in the States. So here we are. It's different time zones.
You'll get the chance. You'll get the chance.
Yeah, exactly. Let's dive in then, because it's one of my favorite questions.
Yeah.
If you could invite one person, living or dead, to a dinner party, who would you choose?
That is a very good question, isn't it? He's still alive, and it's the first thing that pops in my mind. I'm not sure how famous he is in the U.S., but I would guess he's pretty global famous. A gentleman called David Attenborough, a biologist and BBC broadcaster, did all these nature programs, and I've from a child, I've always been fascinated by him and by what he does or what he did. Obviously, he's 97, I think.
He's still going, though.
He's still going, and he is a very active voice, even given his age. At his age, he's a very active voice about the fight against global warming, the fight against the nature destruction in the Amazon, and things that are very, very deep to my heart, and so very close to my heart. And so he is a personal hero in a way, and I'm pretty sure that he would be a very, very interesting person to invite over a dinner, because he must have unbelievable stories about nature and about the places he visited.
And just even hearing him at the dinner table, like, pass the salt and pepper over here.
His voice, and I think this is for a lot of people. Not from he's 97 and 40-ish, different generation. So, but I think the span of what he has done, what he has done spans across many generations. So I think his voice really brings me back all the memories of his shows, and the wonder that I had watching his shows and watching his travels, and so huge fan, and the opportunity of having him over a table and just sort of share. Not share. I would have nothing interesting to share with him, but listening to what he had to say and the stories he had, it would be such a privilege.
That's an incredible answer. When we initially spoke, we didn't even really touch upon your career, what got you into wine. And you've been with Symington Family Estates for more than 15 years now, right? Which is incredible. So tell us more about your career journey and, of course, what makes Symington such an icon in the world of Portuguese wine.
I think, the wine business is one of those areas where you get into it, it's hard to get out of it. Because it really drives a lot of passion, and the interest in the category just drives you to know more and more. And so it's a very interesting area. In my case, I got in because of a family business, because my family I would have been the fifth generation, similar to the Symingtons, actually. The fifth generation in the wine business, very different realities though, because my family was involved in a business of buying grapes, yes, but a lot more buying wines, blending under the family label, and selling it. And the quality of the wines was not particularly great, so very entry level stuff. Not ports. It was mostly Vinho Verde, which is sort of a wine in the north of Portugal, low alcohol, mostly whites. And the quality of the wines always kind of concerned me a little bit. So when I was growing up, I always thought, well, I think I could do better than this. And so the idea of going into winemaking, oenology school, came from there. And so one of those twist of fates that I think every person has at least once in their life. I graduated winemaking in the very same week that we sold the family business. So I ended up going from, hey, I'm ready, to, okay, I've got nothing to do now. So I found another job in a smaller business, about wine education, more business, more sort of wine shop, wine events. And eventually later that year, I wanted to pursue my my winemaking career. That was pretty much one of those decisions where should I continue on the commercial path, or should I go back to the winemaking roots? And everything seemed to be sorted. I had an internship preparing in Australia, and all of a sudden Symington shows up, offers me a job, and not allowing me to keep my winemaking roots at the same time and more involved in the commercial bit. And
so when you say Symington, I'm going to pause you. When Symington
Sure.
shows up, as Americans who were, finding a job is very difficult. What did that transaction look like? How did they find you?
Well, it's interesting because I owe my job at the Symington Family Estates because of a spittoon. And let me explain that. So,
Yes.
the place where I worked had these spittoons that we used for wine events. They were, I think particularly amazing, but a little different, a little bit colorful. So this marketing guy shows up in this shop where I was working, looking for this spittoons. And I said, yeah, let me help you, sure. And my colleague / boss at the time, actually, he said, you know what? I heard you were looking for someone. Why don't you talk to this guy? And so, yeah, sure. You want to apply? Yeah, sure. And so that meeting and that that sort of first approach was because of a spittoon. And then I couldn't say no to Symington. It is, a top, if not the top wine company in Portugal. So you don't really say no to Symington. And I joined in January 2007. And it's been now, 16 and a half, almost 17 years working for them. And it's been a wonderful experience, really, with a lot of great opportunities. So that's my wine journey. And Symington, the reason why we can't say no to Symington is because it is the leading port wine company. And it is one of the great families of wine in the world. And so it's a name that perhaps has been flying under the radar for many years, because more famous for its brands, like Graham's, Dow's, Coburn's, Wars. So these are some of the great port names, and Symington was always the family behind it, but not as famous perhaps. And I think that has changed quite a lot in the last 10 years, and the name has become more famous around the world as a great family of wines.
Right. And it's acquired brands through the years, like Coburn's, I think, was the most recent one.
Coburn's was late 2010.
Gotcha. Okay. And Symington essentially has this portfolio of brands, if you will. They don't have their own brand it's Symington brand itself. It's this family estates, just to clarify.
Correct. No, the only time that Symington is prominent on labels is with our still wines. There is I know Rebecca will hear more about the port side, but we can't really dissociate port from the rest of the Douro. And the Douro has this really fast growing, very exciting still wines, DOC dry wines. And that's where Symington is a bit more prominent on labels and communication. Yeah. But otherwise, we're very much sort of hands off, and it's the brand, it's the port brand that matters.
Yeah. And I do want to touch upon, too, of course, your role, what you're doing right now in the Asian market. But before we do that, just to give more color and context to Symington, just because there's so many initiatives that Symington Family Estates is doing and what it stands for as it relates to sustainability, future of winemaking, and just really great mission-driven company, I would argue. So walk us through that a little bit more, because I know purpose-driven is such a buzzy concept right now.
Yeah, it is a major focus for the business these days. I think it was. I don't think it was entirely the new generation coming in. So it's now the fifth generation. So they were all pretty much in their 30s, and which always was more concerned, perhaps, bring new ideas. But this was already a project from the fourth generation. So it's not that recent. It's been in the making for a number of years. But certainly the fifth generation has brought more energy and more focus into it. And I think the rationale is, I think we should all be doing something. That's it should be everyone's responsibility in our individual lives to make a difference. That's one. But perhaps we as farmers feel it more than anyone else. We're we have the face of the business is always the marketing and the sales, but we're producers, we're farmers, and a region like the Douro, which is so hot and so dry, is really the I'm not going to say it's the canary in the mine, but I think actually somebody actually coined that term for the wine business. The wine business is the canary in the mine. And I think the Douro is certainly one of the regions globally that feels it more because of that nature of being very dry and very hot, and it's just getting worse. And so there was a recognition from the business that if we did not take part in a movement for um, more renewables, less impact, trying to lower our, for example, glass weight. It's such a massive contributor to global emissions. Really, it's probably the most the most impactful thing that anyone can have in a wine industry is the glass and how heavy it is to carry. So all these things, we're just trying to be better at it, really, and not only. These days you probably heard of the greenwashing. It's very easy for people, companies, organizations to come out and say, yeah, we're doing this, and there's no certification behind it. And we wanted that certification, and so we approached two major entities. One of them is the B Corp, so the B Lab organization, who is an American one, but it's global, or an NGO, and it's not just sustainability. They see a lot of other things. How companies treat their workers, their suppliers, their customers, and how improvements within the business. Again, sustainability is a key part of it. And we achieved the B Corp a few years ago, which has been really, really good. We were, I think, the first major European winery to get it, which is excellent. And then at the same time, we were approaching another organization, more wine related, called the Internationally Wineries for Climate Action, so IWCA. And this was founded by one very famous American winery, Jackson Family Wines, and one very famous European winery, the Torres family. And we wanted to be a part of it. And so we decided to go for it. And we were accepted as a member. And there is a complete sort of auditing of what we do and how we do it and where we can improve. And it's good because we keep an eye on each other. So all these different wineries are looking at each other and are setting, hopefully good examples onto others to follow. So these two things have been really useful for us to really look at what we're doing, and it's a process, and I think it's the ambition. We've set some really, really ambitious targets, and it's probably that we're not going to do it. We're not going to achieve it because they're really too ambitious and too difficult. But we love that journey because it forces us to change in every way we can, and whatever we're going to get by 2030, which is sort of our project, it will be substantially better than what we're doing now. And I think that is the ultimate objective. So I'm very proud of speaking about this side of the business because it, again, like I said, it's very dear to my heart, and I think it's the right thing to do.
So tell me more about your role specifically in Symington. You're in the Asian market, and I loved what you had said in our first conversation about how it's kind of the Wild West. It's a blank canvas, if you will, with introducing folks to port wine, which is super exciting. It's almost like introducing port wine to Americans. It's it's a lot of opportunities. So walk us through your role specifically.
So I've been the Asia Pacific manager for the family for the last 13 years, 11 of which now living in Asia, so based here at the moment in Singapore after Hong Kong. And I represent the family wines in the region, and it is a very large region with a lot of people, and it covers from pretty much Pakistan, India, all the way to Japan and the Pacific Islands. So it is a very wide area. And as you said, it is a white canvas for not just for port, but for many other wine categories, particularly wine. And it makes it very exciting because we can communicate our brand messages, our product messages, our consumption moments, our consumption methods, and suggestions without any prejudice from the listener. If you go, it's an extreme example. If you go to the UK and you would talk about, yeah, you should put your port in an ice bucket, and you were talking to this sort of 70-year-old consumer, you're probably going, this guy's crazy. What are you talking about? And how dare you touch in something so sacred as port? And if I do that here, there's no preconceived idea. People just accept it. Well, if you're from the industry and you're suggesting that, then that must be right. And it's exciting. It's exciting because it really allows you to do things right from the start. Of course, the downside of it is that the knowledge is very limited, and so it does require quite a lot of groundwork to build that knowledge, and not just from the consumer; it's from the distributor level as well. I think it's come a long way since I started traveling to this part of the world. It's one thing I love about, and this is terrible generalization, Asians. It's the same thing as saying Europeans. I mean, we're all different cultures, languages, but Asia in general, there is one aspect which I find very, very interesting and exciting. They are very fast learners. They adapt really well, and they're keen to learn. There's this hunger for knowledge, which makes it one perhaps the most exciting part of the world, because people are really keen to tell me more and learn and okay, I know what to do now, and very, very business savvy and immediately knowing what to do. So it's been really exciting, and I think it's finally working. It was a sort of a very long, in a way, lonely process to build it, but now we're seeing the results. Still small within the business, but the fastest growing part of the business.
Where are you seeing the most success in terms of how wines are being received? Is it red wine? Is it white? Is it fortified wines? Port? What are people most responding to?
I mean, in general.
Yeah, in Asia right now.
In Asia, well,
yeah. What are folks drinking?
In terms of drinking, no, I think that in terms of Asia always follows a bit of what is happening in the main areas. London, New York. They listen and they follow. It always takes a couple of years to get here, but eventually it does. So for example, in spirits, you start. Tequila now is absolute madness. And as it is, I know in the States as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So they're picking up here pretty quickly. Whiskey, massive. In terms of wine, it's the usual suspects. Bordeaux used to rule it. Now it's Champagne, Burgundies, and yeah, things started to change there as well. But mostly those, mostly reds. It is a region that is primarily driven by red wine, even in places as hot and humid as Indonesia and Singapore, Malaysia, and Philippines, where you would think that sparkling whites, rosés would work. Sure, there's pockets of business there for that, but it's mostly big, fruit-forward, rich, slightly sweet, a little bit of sugar, and these are the wines that work better. And so, where do we fit? Port being rich, it's delicious, but certainly rich and obviously higher alcohol. It has its advantages in some markets, disadvantages in others, like any other product. But we're seeing growth in areas, for example, like Korea. South Korea is such an impressive market these days for everything.
Interesting. For everything.
For everything.
Yeah.
because the pandemic has led a lot of consumers to discover wine in general. Consumers were at home.
Yeah.
They had nothing else to do, and so wine became one of the things they were discovering, and we went with it. So port was one of the star categories for 2-3 years, and mostly females
Yeah.
and young drinking port
Interesting.
as a reward at the end of the day, which I thought that was a very interesting thing. It was like, okay, I deserve it. I survived another pandemic.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I deserve my glass of port, and it's still ticking away. It's not showing the same growth as before, but certainly has opened up doors for new consumers, which was very good. The usual suspects, China, obviously, there's plenty to do there. The market is somewhat in a difficult situation at the moment, but certainly the potential is there. And then a few surprises like Indonesia, for example, where we do see quite a lot of growth. Consumers are very open to it. You see other markets like Vietnam opening up. You see India is coming back. He's coming not back. It's very, they're just starting, but certainly coming very strong. And then I do have some mature markets. You go to Australia, New Zealand, and you see a market which is much closer to the US market in terms of consumption. So I also have those more mature, traditional markets. But certainly it's a vast region with a multitude of cultures and languages and food and it's an exciting part. Really.
Opportunity. There's lots of opportunities.
Lots of opportunities.
That's how I
sure.
see it. Yeah,
For
that's
sure.
incredible. So getting back to your home country of Portugal, this really surprised me in our first conversation. You had mentioned, and these weren't your words exactly, but that the Portuguese don't necessarily know how to drink port, in that they don't necessarily know how to serve it, to store it, things like that. So tell us more about port wine's place at the Portuguese table.
Sure. Our first conversation.
I lost sleep over this.
You were surprised by it, and I just thought, I wonder how negative I was talking about my own country. Now, look, the fact is, the starting with the positives, the port wine for the Portuguese is a very, very strong reason of pride. Now, we are very proud of it, and that's the reason why port is associated with a commemoration or a special occasion. A toast or a family gathering you finish with a glass of port. I mean, it has this really cool aura of prestige, and you know what, today we're going to have a port. It has that that moment of, okay, let's make this moment even more solemn than just have a glass. So certainly there is a very positive side there. The downside of it is that most Portuguese families do not know how to store or serve it properly, and it's a bottle of port that is open for a very long time. I'm not going to say it so that you don't think badly of us as a culture, but very, very long time, usually in a cupboard somewhere in the back. And it's the Christmas port or it's the birthday port, and everyone goes back and like, I have this port open for a while, but it's fine. Port survives everything, sure. And and served in very tiny chalices where you can't swirl, you can't taste properly. And served off, just room temperature. Which, okay, most of the times, let's say Christmas is winter, so it's not that much of a problem. But there's no understanding that port could and should, in the opinion of the industry, be slightly chilled. There's no understanding of that. So we don't treat it very well, and I think things are changing in the quality on-premise, quality restaurants and bars. So there certainly are a number of places now that take care of it properly, proper storage, proper glassware, proper temperature, which is great, and it's certainly changing mentalities. But traditionally, and even within my family, I work in the port business. I mean, you would imagine that my family would know how to drink port, And not really. And I've told them, look, this is the glass you should use. Because if I'm along with my family and we're enjoying a glass of port, I'll go get my glasses. And they just look at it and like, no, we'll just use ours because you can't drink too much port. You can only have a little bit. Of course you can. You can have a lot. Actually, you can have. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. We're not going anywhere. It's a nice dinner. We just finished dinner. We're home. We're having a chat. Why not? Oh no, just a little. And so it is quite a difficult thing to change. But I think particularly younger generations, they're probably a bit more exposed to what's happening, they follow a bit more like what's this guy doing? What's that? Well, that restaurant's doing this. It's pretty cool, and I think it's gradually changing. But no, if you're expecting Portuguese to be a prime example of how to drink port, it's not necessary.
If not the Portuguese, then who?
Then who? I know, absolutely, absolutely. No, I agree with you. And I think it's a shame. Really, it's a shame because we are so in love with it. There's this pride of it that then it becomes difficult to change because now this is how my grandfather used to do. This is how my parents used to do. This is what I do, and who are you to tell me how I should change? And it goes back to what I was saying in the beginning. It's difficult to change that preconceived idea. But we're trying, and I think tourism has really driven quality of service up. Porto has been complete. Lisbon even more, but certainly Porto, where we are, has been completely overwhelmed by tourism. A lot of American tourism, and it has pushed the quality of service and the quality of food up. There's this demand for better service really, and that has been driving the port consumption up. And port consumption in Portugal has grown very well. Let's forget the pandemic years, but has been growing really, really well. And it's not the Portuguese. We believe it's the tourism.
Interesting.
And expats that have moved to Portugal with a bit more income and a bit more ability to pay for higher quality stuff. And that's they go to a restaurant, they want to be drinking local stuff, and port is obviously a part of it. And so this is gradually forced operators to improve their service as well. Again, so it's actually a very positive thing for the industry, and Portugal has become sort of an exciting market again, but not necessarily because of us Portuguese.
So Symington, you had touched upon this innovation. I love this because I think Symington does this really well with its portfolio of brands, especially Coburn's, which we discussed, which did experiment a little bit with ready to drinks, and its creative Tales of the Unexpected line, which is totally cool. So there's a lot of innovation there, but where do you see from where you sit, because you have a unique vantage point looking over all the brands in the portfolio, where do you see the biggest opportunity for port? Is it an audience segment? Is it a particular style? What do you think?
I would say the opportunity is as for probably any wine or spirits category would be the millennials. Sort of, I would probably say not yet the Generation Z. I would say I think port takes a bit of time to get into. It is a category that I often associate port as a low energy drink, meaning you drink port when you're relaxed. Once you're relaxed, you want to have a conversation. You want to share a moment of just tranquility. Really, the usual sort of port consumption happens when you're more tranquil, more quiet, more relaxed, and so that happens from a certain age onward. So we do tend to focus a bit more on that demographic. So I think the opportunity really is at the moment sort of the older millennials, and certainly already approaching the young millennials that are getting into that stage of life where they're obviously more disposable income, and more open to the sort of moment of consumption. This is globally, I would say. It is a global. Now, we have been, as a company, certainly, as an industry overall, but we certainly have been in a company very, very innovative particularly with Coburns or Grams, for example, with some pretty cool products coming out. And those are very much aiming at the younger audience, again, the 30s demographics. It is a balancing act here because we can't look like we are too cool because we do have the majority of our consumers are 40, 45 plus at the moment. So we can't look like we are neglecting and forgetting them and just going to the young consumers. So there is a fine balance here between how creative we can be, but how traditionalists we must remain. And I think we're doing it correctly because we are touching a few categories that we could be a bit more creative, and we're leaving the more traditional categories as they are. Certainly premiumizing, and I think that is probably the key solution for port in general is just premiumization. And if you look at the creativity happening over the last few years, particularly on Grams and Coburns, with Tales of the Unexpected on Coburns, or the Blend series, Blend number 5, Blend number 12 on Grams, that is actually very premium positioning and looks, but within the entry level categories. So this is premiumizing the standard range, which is or has been sold at more of a commodity within the port world. And it's not so much, it's certainly there's a branded business there, certainly, and consumers will go for the brands they know. But it is a more commodity driven and more price driven category. And so this is where we're trying to innovate. We're trying to premiumize that range of entry levels to make it a bit more relevant, a bit more fun. And on top of it, and this is a structural problem of the Dodo Valley and the port production. The port wine cannot be cheap.
Mhm.
It is impossible to produce a cheap port. If you've been to the Douro, if you've been to our region, you will realize that the landscape is just not conducive of producing high volumes at
Mhm.
low cost. It's impossible. It's mountainous, it's hot, it's dry, and so yields are low. Labor costs are massive, and so we're extremely expensive wine to produce. We can't compete on price. We shouldn't be cheap. It's not sustainable. And so it's premiumization is what we really need for the survival of the category.
Yeah. So my last question then for you, George, and I so appreciate your time. What's your port moment? So do you drink port? Describe for me your scene. Are you watching Netflix? What show? What's going on?
My port moment is I just spoil it because that is my port moment. I even yet so yesterday I sat down on the sofa. I was watching. Actually, I wasn't watching Netflix. I was watching. I think it was Amazon Prime. So I'm talking.
David
I'm
Attenborough,
talking,
maybe?
well, no,
BBC?
I wasn't. I wasn't actually. Um, and I had a single harvest Grams 97 in the fridge. It's been open for probably a month or so, and I just thought, well, yeah. And I just went and fetched a glass and just sit that glass and that was it. That's my port moment. And I love the sharing of a bottle of port between friends.
Mhm.
Usually, I go for a vintage.
Mhm.
As the port guy amongst, let's say, group of friends or in the business, and I'm having dinner with the distributor or whatever. I'm the port guy, so I'm supposed to bring a bottle of port, and I choose usually a bottle of vintage because I love the opening, decanting, the
The
discovery
formality.
the formality of it. I love that, and I
Yeah.
and again, we're talking about innovation, but the traditional side is such a cool thing,
Mhm.
and we can't dismiss it. It's a powerful thing. So I love the decanting of it. And then we're all okay. How the wine developed and how's it looking. We should have opened it in 10 years' time. Look at it. It's still that I love. But I have the selfish port moments, and my selfish port moments are the sofa moment where it's just me, glass of port, and I'm happy, and I don't need to talk about it, don't need to discuss it, just sip, and of course the ability for most ports to be able to keep open for a couple of months allows you to do that. It's your after dinner. It's your reward at the end of the day. That is my port moment. It's my selfish port.
I love that you would use the word tranquility to describe port, because that's kind of, I kind of associate sometimes too with rowdy dinner parties, but there's a tranquility in that chaos, in the sense that you're not on your device, you're not busy working, you're connecting with people, you're engaging, you're sharing stories, and it's so primal. Like, that's what we do. As we came out of the cave, or we were in the cave by a fire, drinking or eating and talking and sharing stories. And I love that.
It enhances conversations. That's actually one of the things that we're using as a communication. Sort of, it builds conversations. And actually, when you bring a bottle of port, it's kind of funny. There's a sense of, you're like talking, then there's a bottle of port, and everyone just sort of quiets down. This kind of
Americans maybe not my dinner parties.
No, but the conversation then starts again. It picks up.
Yes.
But there's this sort of it's port time. Okay, all right. No, there's a quiet down. It's port time, and I think it's the formality of it, which can be bad in a way, because I don't think people live formal these days. But I love how it conduces to that. Okay, pause, tranquil, relaxing. So I think that is the ultimate port advantage as a product. Really, it's
and also from the American perspective, it's something new and it's something different. Quite honestly, I mean, it's something that's so old, but I know growing up and having dinner parties with my friends, we loved the pageantry. At least I did. Fascinated by, small glasses, a little serving. And then to your point, there is that moment of kind of pause and discovery. And I always liken it to putting another log on the fire. It's kind of just wait till it gets going type thing. And then people start sharing like the deep, dark secrets. And then the stories get and then it's 2 a.m. and people are,
that's it.
We should have gone to bed hours ago, but here we are.
That's it. That is the power of a wine like port that has that ability to just relax, soothing, and giving time for these conversations to happen. That is the ultimate port power, I think. Thank
you so much, Giorgio. This has been incredible. I'm a huge fan of Symington Family Estates. I just think everything you guys do, from partnerships with Rewilding Portugal and everything you stand for, you're making remarkable strides and things. So
thank you for that. Yeah. And thank you for the opportunity for me to be here talking a bit about us and what we're trying to do, and I think the challenges and the advantages of the industry. But thank you for waving the port flag and good luck. I mean, the U.S. obviously I'm based quite far away from you guys, but I did work in the U.S. for a bit with port. And the potential of the U.S. market is still, even though it's such a big market for us already, but I believe there's still so much more to do and grow. Yeah. And so any help that we can get, it's so welcome.
I love it. It's an uphill climb for sure, but there's a lot of opportunity. So that's the most exciting part. So as long as the Portuguese continue to drink port, then we're good.
and in a better way, I hope.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, George. And listen, have a great rest of your day. I know your day's just starting, so thank you.
Have a good night for you guys there.
All right. Take care.
Bye, Rebecca. Bye. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Drink Port, a podcast from Starboard. Interested in being featured? Visit starboardwine.com/podcast to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter so you can join the venture to a new port. Cheers and drink port.